I never expected my parents, who adored my genius sister, to tell me that they didn't need me. One child is enough, we don't need you, you're useless. That's what they said when they kicked me out, and I was just a kid. The one who reached out to me was my uncle. I'm poor, but let's live together. I took his hand without hesitation. My name is Emma. I'm 30 years old now, but I have a complicated past. It's because of family matters, and I'd like to share my story with you. I was born into an ordinary family with a salaryman father and a housewife mother. We lived with my dad's parents, along with my dad's unmarried younger brother. We all moved in when I was 4 years old, and my uncle was 24. Living at home and being single at that age wasn't exactly unusual, but my uncle had a reason why he couldn't move out of the family home. As a child, I did not know the details, but it seems that my uncle had been sickly since childhood. Even as an adult, he was prone to illness, which made it hard for him to keep a steady job. Eventually, he became a freelancer, but he only worked short hours, like 2 days a week. That income wasn't enough to live on his own, not even close. Because of this, he always looked like he felt bad about living with his parents at his age. I often heard my dad yell at my uncle, saying, "What a burden you are." He'd always do it when my grandparents weren't around. The grandparents loved both the healthy older brother and the sickly younger brother equally. Since we were living together because of the recession, and my dad was relying on them, he probably tried to be more reserved in front of my grandparents. When they weren't around, though, my dad would talk down to my uncle and laugh at him. Even though my uncle looked sad, he never got angry or talked back, he just stayed quiet. One time, I asked him, "Why don't you get mad?" He replied with a pained expression, saying, "Well, it's true that I rely on my parents." As a kid, I accepted that answer, but now, as an adult, I think, Dad also relies on them, so he has no right to say anything. If I had understood that back then, I would have stood up for my uncle. Although I didn't like my dad yelling at my uncle, I didn't say anything. Even though things were tense when my grandparents weren't around, when they were there, everyone seemed to get along. In front of my grandparents, my uncle seemed relaxed and smiling, and my father didn't show how he felt about it, no matter how he felt inside. My mom was busy looking after me and my younger sister, so she didn't seem to care about the relationship between my dad and my uncle. When I was little, I thought this same old daily routine would last forever. But then, everything changed in an instant. My grandparents died in an accident. I was 6 years old. It was so sad, and I cried a lot. My sister and I both bawled our eyes out. I remember my uncle quietly shedding tears, too. But what really stuck with me was my dad's reaction, his laugh. Yeah, my dad left. Even though his own parents had passed away, he did not cry once when he rushed to the hospital or while preparing for the funeral. It's not that he's putting on a brave face. It was clear to me as a child that he wasn't grieving. And that's what convinced me. On the day of the funeral, my dad was smiling. He probably thought no one was watching. But I casually looked at him and saw that smile on his face. It wasn't the kind of smile that comes from grief or confusion, it was the kind of smile that showed he was genuinely thrilled. He was happy about my grandparents' deaths. He was probably already thinking about the money he'd get. The smile was so hideous that it scared me, and I started crying. He must have thought I was crying because I was upset about my grandparents' deaths. My uncle placed his hand on my head and gently stroked it. When I looked up, he had red, teary eyes, but his gaze was filled with warmth. It's odd, isn't it? Despite being brothers, my dad and uncle had such opposite reactions to their parents' deaths. It was the moment my discomfort with my dad grew stronger. After that, my dad's behavior changed drastically. His attitude toward my uncle became blatantly bad. "Why do I have to take care of a worthless person like you? You should be grateful I'm letting you live here. If you can't pay rent or anything, I get to keep all the inheritance." I didn't understand it at the time, but his words were incredibly unfair. Inheritance is supposed to be equally divided among siblings, but my dad took it all, claiming he was the family breadwinner. My uncle could have stood his ground or sought legal help, but my uncle didn't do that. Even though he looked sad, he didn't argue or demand his share of the inheritance. Worried about my uncle, who seemed down, I asked him, "Are you okay?" "I'm sickly and can't really work much, so it can't be helped," my uncle said with a weak smile. Every day, my dad insulted him, and my sickly uncle grew thinner and paler. Even so, my uncle would smile at me and say, "It's okay." 3 months after my grandparents' deaths, my uncle was eventually kicked out of the house. "Get out, you good for nothing," my dad said. My uncle left without arguing or resisting. "Uncle, don't go." I cried, holding on to him, but he gently removed my hand and patted my head. "It's okay. Emma, you're a strong kid, so you'll be fine without me." "But you won't be fine, will you?" My uncle, who was sickly and couldn't hold a regular job. How could my uncle, in his condition, live on his own? With tears in his eyes, my uncle replied, "I'll be fine," and walked away. I felt sad about losing him, but there wasn't much I could do as a child. Plus, I wasn't in a situation to be worrying about other people either. 2 years after my grandparents died, I was 8, attending elementary school. My sister, Lily, was 6, about to start elementary school. It all began when my mom said, at kindergarten, they said Lily is smart. My dad, all excited, said, maybe she's a genius like me. He decided on a whim to have her take an IQ test. The result was shocking. IQ 150. It must be my genes. The results showed she had an IQ of 150. I didn't really get it, but I knew it was a big deal. Lily, that's awesome. Thanks, sis. Without fully understanding, I praised my sister, and she gave me a happy smile. Back then, everything was good. It was all good until then. That's when everything went downhill. Okay, let's prep for the entrance exams. My father, who's always quick to act on his farts, makes an announcement. Now, my mother was also surprised, but motivated by my father's mysterious confidence. She's a genius, she'll be fine. After that, my sister started attending a cram school every day. Since my mom accompanied her, the housework fell behind. So my dad said to me, "Hey, your mom and Lily are busy, so you take care of the house," he said to me. From then on, I was in charge of the laundry and cleaning. When school ended, I couldn't hang out with my friends. I had to go straight home and do the chores, or my parents would get mad at me. If I didn't do a good job, I'd be skipped for dinner some days. "I don't have time to take care of a failure like you," he said. "Why can't you score a perfect 100? My dad shouted, looking at my tests in the 90s. "Honestly, you should learn from your sister." My mom said this with an exasperated tone. Even if I got a good test score or won first place at a sports day, my parents wouldn't acknowledge it. They'd just ignore me and repeat like robots, "Learn from your sister, Lily." Then they'd say, "But I guess you can't. She's a genius, but you're incompetent." My sister truly was a genius. With just a short time at a cram school, she quickly aced the entrance exams. After that, my parents became even colder toward me. They spent their money on her. I didn't even get new clothes. I had to wear old ones that were too small. My sister got the good food. I got the leftovers. She got to go on trips. I stayed at home. My parents obviously adored her. My dad laughs and says, "This kid is going to be a big shot one day, and then our retirement will be secure. Doctor or lawyer. Or maybe a politician might be good, too." My mom added, "We're so lucky to have a genius daughter." They didn't see me. They forgot about me crying in my sister's shadow. Finally, when I was 10, my parents told me, "Lily's gifted education is costing a lot of money, so we don't need you." "What?" my father says to me as I struggle to understand. "What do you mean? We only need one kid, and that's Lily." "No way. How can I live alone?" "I'll give you my brother's contact information. I'll give you an allowance, do something on your own." I was really given just an allowance, and I was really kicked out of the house. I cried and pounded on the front door, begging to be let back in, but there was no response. The door wouldn't open. In despair, I headed to the train station. At 10 years old, I had enough knowledge to know how to use the train. I asked for directions and somehow found my way to my uncle's apartment. I rang the bell, and my uncle came out, looking just as kind as I remembered him. When I told him what happened, he was furious. What were my brother and sister-in-law thinking? Even though I wasn't the one being yelled at, I felt bad and started to worry about being a burden. Tears welled up in my eyes as I wondered what to do next. A hand was placed on my bowed head. It was the same large, warm, gentle hand from my memory. It's been rough, but you're safe now. But what should I do now? As you can see, I'm still prone to getting sick. I don't earn much, and I'm poor. My uncle gave me a wry smile as I looked up at him. Even so, he looked stronger than when we lived together. Maybe he felt different now that he was away from my father. My uncle, who looked straight at me, smiled and said, "I know I'm poor, but if you don't mind, I'd be happy to be your dad," he said. "Really? Or, I guess I'd be your adoptive dad. I may not be unreliable, but..." Before he could finish, I jumped into his big chest. Even though he looked like my dad, he was entirely different. His embrace felt secure. "You're safe now." As I cried with relief, my uncle gently stroked my back. It felt like genuine love, like what you'd expect from a real parent. From then on, I grew up with my uncle. It's true that my uncle was poor and still often sick, making things pretty challenging. But even though we were poor, our home was filled with smiles. While I was with my parents, I forgot how to laugh, but living with my uncle, I found myself smiling more. Even if we were poor, it was a happy family. My uncle gave me so much love. I wanted to repay to my uncle, so I did my best in everything I did. When I worked hard, my uncle praised me. Even when the results were poor, he praised me for my effort. That made me happy, so I tried even harder. My parents, who never gave me any praise, will one day no longer be remembered. I grew up quickly with my uncle, and in no time, 20 years have passed. I'm now 30 years old. And now, in front of me, stands a familiar face. Dad, Mom. Long time no see, Emma, glad to see you're alive. Laughing like that was my father, whom I had relegated to a distant memory. He'd aged a lot, his hair nearly gone. I looked at him with cold eyes. No wonder. I mean, why now? It was too late for a reunion. Despite my icy stare, my dad said, "Let's just put the past behind us and move forward. Let's be a family again." "What?" I replied. What are you talking about? A happy family? Give me a break. I knew you were a failure, and you were rude. I'll start educating you again now." "No, I'm good. Just leave." My dad tried to enter the apartment, but I pushed him back. Then my mom joined in. "Emma, stop acting tough. You should rely on us. You're living in this shabby apartment. You can't be doing well. It's none of your business, just go home. Don't act tough. Just let us in." "No, leave." "Let us in. Leave. Now." What's with these two? If I remember correctly, they're both in their mid-50s and should be losing their strength, but they still seem overly energetic. Or maybe that's not it. If they're both coming at me, of course I'm going to be overpowered. I was nonchalantly thinking that I had been pushed around like a pigeon in a row and wanted to cry when my father's feet reached the front door, so I pushed him back with all my might, like a sumo wrestler, shouting, "Heck. Whoa. Wah." Both of my parents lost their balance and landed on their butts. Naturally, I ended up looking down at them. "Oh, come on, you two are such a pain." "What? Listen, I'm busy. Can you please just leave? How dare you talk to us like that? Don't you know we're your parents? I stopped thinking of you as parents the moment you threw me out, but we raised you until you were 10. Until I was 10, yay. But I think the only time I had proper care was when my grandparents were still alive. But we kept you alive, didn't we? Just barely. That doesn't give you the right to act all high and mighty." As my parents stood up, rubbing their sore backs, they looked so much smaller. Even though they were only in their 50s, they seemed more like they were in their 70s. "You said you only needed Lily because she's a genius. So why do you need to see me?" "It didn't work out like that," my dad replied with a grimace. "What happened to Lily? Did she become a NEET?" "No, she became a lawyer." "Well, that's impressive, as expected from someone with an IQ of 150. But then she disappeared." "That's amazing." After I asked what happened, I was told that Lily went through law school, continued on to graduate school, and then took the bar exam. She didn't pass on the first try, but eventually, she did. I don't know, but there was some training and stuff after that, and after completing those things, she officially became a lawyer. So, why did she disappear? That kid said, "I won't take care of you," and just left. Sounds like you got abandoned. Congrats. That's not a good thing. That ungrateful brat, after everything we did for her. Well, I wasn't very affectionate. My parents thought they adored Lily, but it was probably just oppressive for her. Their entire attitude changed just because of her high IQ. Parents with excessive expectations. Parents who, under the guise of affection, were just imposing their own desires. No wonder Lily walked away. My company went bankrupt. It's a recession after all. My severance package is worth nothing, and my unemployment benefits are coming to an end. Good for you. Not at all. And I'm too old to start over with a new job. Too hard, huh? LOL. The lack of motivation makes me laugh. So take care of us. My smile vanished. No, thanks. What? Are you going to abandon your parents? My only parent is the uncle who raised me since I was 10. Huh. Dad looked stunned at my words. You knew I was living with my uncle when you came to this apartment, didn't you? What's the surprise now? You really think of him as your dad? Yay, because he's the one who showered me with love. My parents were shocked when I implied, you two never gave me any love, so you're not my parents. Even though he's sick, Uncle worked hard to make sure I didn't suffer. And I worked really hard to make him proud. So you're in a pretty good job now. Yay, you could say that. When I shrugged, Dad grabbed my shoulder tightly. Let go. I get it, you're mad and a bit embarrassed. Listen to what people are saying. No, I don't need to hear it. I know what you're feeling. You were neglected, right? Always overshadowed by your sister, but you're so happy to see your parents that you're embarrassed. Stop making things up. Don't worry, we're going to be together as a family from now on. I was confused. Did Dad already have dementia or something? I looked at my parents for a moment, then couldn't help but laugh at their dumbfounded expressions. What's so funny? Are you happy? Ha ha ha, definitely not. Just so you know, I haven't thought about you two for 10 years. Thanks to Uncle, I've been living my best life. My parents were taken aback by my sudden laughter, so I continued. I even graduated from college with the help of a scholarship. Oh, really? So you've got a good job. Yep, I work for a pretty well-known company. Wow, that's great. And I got married too. Though. I guess I should meet my son-in-law. No need. Oh, but I have to. Nope, because he's abroad. Oh, I see. Wait, what? And so is Uncle. What? My brother too. What do you mean? I thought if you're living here alone, he's sickly and already. Do not make my uncle deceased freely. I heard that it was a good place for him to rest after his overseas assignment, so he went there too. He is feeling much better and playing with my children. Wait, you have kids? The flood of information was clearly overwhelming them. I grinned as they stared in disbelief. At first Uncle was reluctant to live with us, but he finally accepted it. We all enjoy living together as a family. Then maybe we could go overseas too. Fine, but we won't be living together, and I won't be taking care of you. You're on your own. But that's impossible. Are you going to abandon us? You're the ones who threw me out first. Their audacity made me snap. My parents turned pale. You two don't deserve anything from me. But I owe Uncle a lot, and I plan to repay him. Then could you at least send us some money? Uncle had been living in this shabby apartment for a long time without touching the money I was sending him. But he finally agreed to live with us over there, so I came to take care of the paperwork. What? It's pretty funny how you show up on the day we're moving out of this crummy apartment. What a coincidence. What? Wait, are you really leaving? The paperwork is done, so now I just need to return the keys and I'm out. I'm heading back to my place overseas. And what about us? Are you just abandoning your mom and dad? My mother, looking just as pale as my father, asked. I nodded emphatically. Thanks for throwing me away. I smiled, and they were left speechless. Seriously, thank you. I'm happy now, thanks to you. With that, I walked past them. How does it feel to be abandoned by both your daughters after you threw one away? The last time I asked, there was no response. I also left without waiting for a response. This would be my final farewell to my parents. I then returned to my home overseas. Living with my uncle, I worked really hard. My efforts paid off, and I landed a good job at a reputable company. I then moved abroad, where I met my husband. My uncle cried with joy when he congratulated me on my marriage. Now I have a child and invited my uncle to live with us. I live happily with my husband, children, and uncle. And then, oh, I'd love to find a wonderful guy like your husband soon, my sister said as she watched the kids playing in the yard with a smile. Well, now that you're finally free from our parents' control, I'm sure you'll find a good one. More importantly, I need to get a job soon. Why not become a lawyer here? I don't think being a lawyer is for me. I've had enough of obeying our parents. I'm going to pursue a job I want. I see. Right after I left home after being abandoned by our parents, I received a letter from my sister to our uncle. The letter was about how hard it was for her to deal with the distorted love and pressure of our parents, so I decided to visit my sister on her way home from elementary school with uncle, and we contacted each other without our parents finding out. My sister also wanted to come to our uncle, but due to our uncle's financial situation, he cannot afford to take both of us, and above all, our parents wouldn't allow it. So we planned in the meantime she lived with our parents where she could make a living, and as soon as she became an adult, she would leave home. It was tough to impose such hardships on my sister, but she bravely overcame the trials and gained her freedom. Taking advantage of my parents' excitement over my sister becoming a lawyer, she moved out of the house. Of course, I was the one who helped her with that. She found a job here, but she's struggling with language and getting used to things. But she'll be fine. After all, she lived with those parents. I don't know anyone more patient and hardworking than my sister. I'm sure she'll adjust here soon enough. I'm more worried about my uncle. When I said, "Uncle's going to a language school," my sister nodded with a smile. "Oh, that's good. It's never too late for anything. He's also fully recovered, so he should enjoy his life now." Yeah, totally. My parents, who took all my uncle's inheritance and made it their own, spent recklessly and quickly ran out of money. They tried hard to invest in their daughter, but now they've lost their jobs. They sold their house to get some cash, but they had used it as collateral for a remodeling loan or something, so they had little left. They've been going around asking relatives for money, but everyone turns them down, so they are forced to live in poverty. A relative told me with a wry smile that the couple can stop fighting. It's unthinkable to look down on your siblings or discriminate your children. Yay, for sure. My sister nodded in agreement. Wait, you're leaving? I asked her. I've been protected long enough. Thanks, sis. I got a little emotional when I heard my sister, who's grown so much, say that. Protected from what? A hand pats my head. It had more wrinkles and felt smaller, but it was still warm. I looked back with a smile. Thanks. Huh. My uncle had a confused look on his face, and I told him with a laugh. Thanks, Dad, I love you.